Hello and welcome back to How It's Done TV. Today I'm here with Mark again for another episode of the Restored Church of God. Like I said, we would come back when we have updates, and we got some updates for you.
Oh boy.
Yes. So how are you doing, Mark?
Hanging in there as best I can.
And you've been busy blogging and keeping up on things.
Yes. Lots of facts to track online, quotes to get right, websites to check, etc., etc.
Now, our interviews and your website have been gaining a lot more traction in regards to this subject, especially from the people in Wadsworth. I mean, there's outsiders who make comments on a lot of things. Can you speak about the big news you received since we last spoke?
Well, we'll go in sequential order because we have a couple of big items to cover today. But the first thing that I found out about was that the Restored Church of God was selling one of their properties. There was a house on Hartman Road that the church bought years ago. And I found out from somebody in the community, actually two people in the Wadsworth community reached out to me independently to let me know, hey, RCG is selling one of their properties. And at first I was shocked by it because that is unheard of. RCG has never sold one of the houses on the campus since they built it in 2015. So that was a big news story. And so I got confirmation by going to the Zillow website and found out all the information for the house. And one of the houses that I've been in there, and I've actually helped people move there, I would probably say 3 or 4 different times I've helped people move in and out of the house. It's a beautiful house at a beautiful location. And they were putting it up for sale. And so I went there that night and got a picture of the for sale sign in their front yard just to confirm it and see for my own eyes that it was true. And they put a house up for sale.
So let's answer this question for those that may just be joining us. They have a besides their campus, which they call their world headquarters, they own a bunch of properties on Akron Road and Hartman Road. And those are for who?
Those are for mostly the ministry, but they also have staff who live in those houses. Now, the Restored Church of God owns the properties, but people who live in them rent from them.
Okay.
So they basically are landowners or property owners, and then they have tenants. And the tenants, depending on what property we're talking about, the houses built inside the campus or all the houses that they have purchased and renovated and fixed up along outside the campus that surround it, those people are invited to live there. Those are usually the ministers first. And when they run out of ministers, then there are select headquarters congregation and headquarters staff people who are allowed to rent from them. And so by the fact that they were selling a property that was occupied at the time brought up a host of questions immediately. Number one, as a business, you don't liquidate your assets unless you have to. So the fact that they were putting up a property for sale, which again, they had never done since 2015, they were always interested in purchasing property. It raised a lot of questions as to maybe they're not as financially sound as they say they are. And these were just questions because I didn't have the answers to why they sold the house at the time. But the situation opened up a door for me because I realized how responsive and thoughtful the Wadsworth community is by reaching out to me unsolicited and giving me information like, hey, RCG is selling one of their homes. And I probably would not have caught it because I don't sit and monitor what they do. I don't look at the county records. I don't monitor what's for sale because I never in my wildest dreams would have ever imagined that they would actually sell a property. So it brought up a lot of questions. And I wrote an article about that. Is RCG strapped for cash? Because Brad Schleifer and Dave Pack were touting how well the church was doing. And it's like, well, if you're doing so well, why are you selling the property?
After this information went public, you received another tip about RCG Financial Development that they were in the process of purchasing a property, and not just any property. This property was listed for $600,000 on Akron Road. And I guess you could say it was connected to the campus where it was at. I mean, that's legal. But why is it so noteworthy to be like, oh my gosh?
Well, they wouldn't say, oh my gosh, but it's an interesting point
Well,
because
we're saying
the
the
fact that
public,
they,
what?
the fact that chronologically speaking, the house going up for sale, once I started looking into all the records on Zillow and getting information from folks in the Wadsworth community and looking at the Medina County records, the house going up for sale actually happened second in chronologically speaking, but I found out about it first. And then when I found out that RCG had put in a bid on a $600,000 property, a property that was listed as $600,000, connected directly to the campus, suddenly made sense. Ah, they're selling one property so that they could purchase another. The Hartman Road house was not directly connected to the campus. It was kind of one of the properties along Hartman Road, but it wasn't like, it was, if it was connected, it was only touching the property line. It wasn't like right next to it or adjacent to it. So I could see why the Akron Road house was much more valuable to them. But the fact that they were purchasing a property, the timing of it was what my concern was. And because I've been following what David 𝐶 teaches, prophetically speaking, around all this time, when I'm hearing all this information, I was like, are you sure they're purchasing it? Are you sure? I sat on that information for about 3.5 weeks. Somebody gave three independent people gave me confirmation that, hey, RCG is purchasing this certain property. But I couldn't write about it. I couldn't report about it. And Don, I sat on that information and I was like sitting on my hands. I couldn't wait to get out there and confirm it, but I didn't want to report anything. It was just rumor. I had heard from former members in the Restored Church of God that David 𝐶 always had his eyes on that particular property because it was connected directly to the campus. And in fact, their grass touched the campus grass. And so you could visually see it. You could see the property line visually from where the campus was. And I had heard from many sources that David 𝐶 had always wanted that property. So the fact that it went up for sale and then he put a bid on it, it made sense. But what didn't make sense, and going back to your original question of why this is a big deal, or why anybody should care, of course, them buying property is perfectly legal. The problem is at the time that all these things were transpiring, these financial transactions, David 𝐶 was preaching that Jesus Christ was returning imminently. And then he also, I'm sorry, my internet just went wonky there for a second. I don't know if you heard me. He, at the same exact time, he had also been pushing for common among the membership. The common doctrine is you basically sell all and give it to the church in the book of Acts. There's something called, they had all things common. There are other videos where we've talked about that pretty specifically. And also I've written about it very specifically if people want to look into more about what common is. But basically, David 𝐶 got in front of the church and told them, you better send in all your money. It's tied to salvation and you won't have time to spend it either. And meanwhile, after telling people they need to send in their money, he puts a bid on a house that was listed for $600,000 and selling a house for $269,000 that they previously had. And one could naturally go, well, you clearly don't believe your own teachings. If Christ is returning imminently, you don't do any big financial transactions. And the timing of him asking right before Pentecost, asking for money, and then again, right before he placed a bid on this house, telling people to send in their money to the church to do God's work, and then he buys a new house is suspect. Is it legal? Yes. Is it ethical? That's a question for people to decide for themselves.
Now, you've learned all this literally from residents of the community, correct?
Yeah.
And
the people inside Wadsworth, either on the Facebook group or I get emails from folks who have found me through the Facebook or the website, exrcg.org. The contact information is there and they write me to give me tidbits of information. So the eyes and the ears of Wadsworth out there are helping me report the news. I'm basically just a vessel and a platform in which to investigate and report on these issues. And that's why I sat on it for weeks. It's like, I believe these independent people who write me separately telling me the same thing. That seems like logical confirmation, but until I could get anything in writing from Medina County that in fact the Restored Church of God did purchase a property and were selling a property, I couldn't really report on it.
Now, one of the big things that we strive for on HID TV is to make sure whatever series or videos we do, that the information is correct. Now, how did you verify this information that you got, and where did you get your facts?
Well, for the house going on sale, that one's pretty easy because I knew RCG owned it. I mean, I've been in and out of that house many times over the years. I confirmed it by going to the property myself and taking pictures of the for sale sign. I went to the real estate agent's website and saw that the property was listed for sale. And I also went on Zillow. And Zillow is a real estate website that had a bunch of pictures and also information. And so when I heard about the Akron Roadhouse being purchased, it was listed for $600,000. And the way I knew that was on the Zillow website and again, the real estate agent's own website. And to confirm that the Restored Church of God actually did purchase the property and it wasn't a rumor that RCG was doing it, or maybe a member who was independently wealthy, which there's no such thing in RCG, was I went to the Medina County website that has a list of all the properties, the same website that you've used to compile your Excel document that needs some updating, about all the properties owned by the Restored Church of God. And you can type in, anybody can go to the Medina County tax auditor's website, type in the Restored Church of God, and you can see all the properties listed and the dates the transactions happened. And once I confirmed and saw the Restored Church of God listed, it was now fact. And I even called the Medina County office and asked them over the phone, can you verify?
Site, correct?
I'm sorry?
This is the Medina County auditors.
Auditors, yes, thank
Yes,
you.
okay.
Sorry, the auditors. I'm sure you'll provide the link.
Yes, we're going to provide the links for everything in documents for Google Docs that we keep putting in so the public can see. It's all public record.
Yeah. So this is all public information. This is not confidential private information. This is not a violation of any confidentiality agreements or doing anything illegal at all. It's something that people can just, with a browser and internet, find out all this information. I'm not an investigative reporter, but I started to put that hat on because I wanted to verify facts before I even wrote about it, even though I knew weeks in advance. So once I confirmed through the real estate agent website, the Zillow website, and then the Medina County records that RCG had in fact bought this property, then I reported it as fact. And that is all thanks to the people of Wadsworth who on their own give information, because I wouldn't know unless I drove past a certain place and saw a sign that that was really happening. So I want to thank all the people of Wadsworth who've been supportive and giving information.
Now, do you have a specific timeline of these events? I know you've explained them, but just to give a flat out time of events so people understand why this is important and kind of a big deal.
Yes. So on my website, exrcg.org, I've done a series of articles. The first one is RCG strapped for cash? And then the second article, which was a follow-up about 3 or 4 weeks later, was called the David C. Pack's or RCG's $500,000 eyesore. The house listed at $600,000, but I confirmed that they purchased it for $500,000, which, good for them. I'm sure that the owners were hoping to get $600,000, but RGC said, "Oh no, we're just a little tiny nonprofit church. Oh, please have mercy on us. Cut $100,000." So it's only $500,000. We're only spending $500,000 of the brethren's money to buy a house that's completely, well, I won't get into that yet. So the timeline, I get worked up when I talk about this. So the timeline is, I'm going to read from my article because it puts everything in perspective. On May 28th, during part 391, David C. Pack pushes Common with Pentecost approaching so he could pump up the Holy Day offering. On June 15th, during part 378, he pushes Common again while telling the brethren that Jesus Christ was turning soon and their salvation depended upon them taking action. This is the same day that the Akron Roadhouse lists for sale at $600,000. On July 17th, David C. Pack tells the church that the day of the Lord is July 28th and Jesus Christ was only hours away. On July 20th, RCG submits a $500,000 to the Akron Road property. On August 4th, RCG puts the Hartman Roadhouse up for sale. So this is where I got the information. I got it backwards. I found out about the Hartman Roadhouse going for sale, not knowing that 2 weeks before, RCG had already put an offer on the Akron Roadhouse. On August 31st, RCG begins work on the Akron Road property after closing the deal. There was visual confirmation that RCG employees were working on the property, and kind of the punchline about why he bought the property was explained when somebody read my article and said, now it makes sense. The first thing they did was mow the lawn. The first thing the Restored Church of God did when they purchased the Akron Road house was mow the lawn. Keep note of that. On September 2nd, the Hartman Roadhouse is vacated, and then on September 9th, the Hartman Roadhouse deal is closed and it was bought by a private party. So I'm not going to mention names or addresses because that property now belongs to citizens of Wadsworth. So people who know and can read the article can find out that information. So that's the list of events that happened, all the while flavored with David 𝐶 saying things like this in part 378. But I would just say to all of God's people, you're going to have to sell all. And God's people around the world, I'm telling you, if you're sitting on funds, don't. You're going to lose it soon after anyway, so why not gain eternal life with it? And then he buys a house with that money when those people obeyed. And that is the outrageous, atrocious thing that David 𝐶 is doing, while claiming to be a man of God, claiming that the money going is preaching the gospel and helping preach the gospel, helping the church, and he turns around and spends $500,000 on that money to buy a house.
So David 𝐶 told the church that common,
yes,
explained earlier was conditional for their salvation.
Yes.
But then took the money and purchased that $500,000 property, which, I mean, what do you think about that?
I think it's awful. I think that that house will do just as much to preach the gospel as the horses do. I think that it's dishonest to tell everybody that you believe Jesus Christ is coming soon and then within days purchase a house.
Now, besides yourself, though, you have a network of former members that feel the same way you do.
Oh, sure. I mean, I gave common and I believed it was going towards the work and doing the work of God and preaching the gospel. But the problem is that RCG has actively stopped doing that. The World to Come broadcast hasn't been recorded in years. There's no new literature going out. In fact, the literature, it's impossible for the literature to stay up to date with their current teaching. So people come into the church, come into the Restored Church of God, believing one thing, and then sit down and start listening to message and realize, oh, we don't really teach that anymore. Oh, we don't really teach that anymore. Oh, it's different now. That's kind of a bait and switch. And if I were joining RCG now, I would be appalled to learn that my tithes and offerings and common are being used to purchase properties. For what reason? What would be the reason to have the property other than it being an ego project for David 𝐶?
Now, how does this property, I mean, even help the members? I'm a little confused on, that. And we talked a little bit earlier about the taxes that they have to pay yearly.
Yes. Well, when you say that the church is spending $500,000, that's just the bid. And anybody who buys real estate knows there's closing costs. And according to Zillow, the closing costs are approximately an additional $50,000. And the Zillow estimate calculator also says, or I'm sorry, the Medina County estimate tax count calculator, that the property is going to be about $10,000 a year in property taxes. So that's a good chunk of change. We're actually getting closer and closer to $600,000. And if you look at the property pictures on Akron Road, it's a $500,000 fixer-upper. It is not a turnkey. The exterior alone, there's no way that they will keep that exterior looking the way it does. The interior pictures, I mean, it's a nice house. The layout is very interesting, but that green shag carpet is
it's clean, but it is dated to the 70s. Like everything needs redone.
It does
Why do
not
you think
fit.
it's so expensive? It's the land, right? It's like what, 5 acres?
I don't have the acres in front of me. I think the total was 3 because I just last week found out that in their purchase, they purchased 2 parcels of land. One was 1.66 acres and the other one, I don't have it in front of me. If I pull up the listing, I can give you an exact number. But
Because
basically, they bought a couple of acres worth of land for $500,000. The house itself is 2,500 square feet, 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom.
okay.
Yeah. So and the land, the adjacent grass was actually the real issue. 3.58 acres plus the 1.66. So if you want to grab a calculator, go ahead. So that's a pretty good deal for a big house, for, bedrooms and bathrooms, but it's a fixer-upper. And they will use church labor. The guys who work outside will do renovations. They have their vendors and contractors that they'll hire to do the professional grade work inside. But there's no way that the green shag carpet is going to survive the RCG conversion process. And the basement looks like it needs to be completely redone. It's very much a snapshot from the 1970s. So there's a lot of money and a lot of work that has to go in the house. The first thing they started was landscaping, and it all made sense because I knew that the motivation for David C. Pack was that on his evening walks, he hated seeing the grass. There are aerial pictures from that property when it was sold, and actually the Medina County property line shows you pretty clearly that there is a visual separation between that Akron Road property parcel and the RCG campus. There's no wall, there's no tree line. It's just a beautifully manicured field, and then all of a sudden stop on a dime with overgrowth. And I know that annoyed David Pack unbelievably. He wanted the house. The whole purpose of the Akron Road house was an ego project because he hated seeing that grass misaligned. And so the first thing he did was, when he got the property, is he told them, you go mow that lawn. And that's the first thing they did to the house. So he paid $500,000 because he didn't like the lawn. How does that preach the gospel? How does that help the brethren of the Restored Church of God? How does that help do the work? It doesn't. And that's the point.
So I'm taking it that he sold the one property on Hartman so they could afford this other property. So, and they were probably forced to have to do that. Then with the fees that they're going to have to use to fix it up, plus running it out. Now, you explained to me when we were talking one day that I was like, so how many people are they going to have to live there? And they're going to have a lot of money, and you explained that, and I asked, I said, how can they afford all that rent plus the, taxes when they're pretty much handing over their paychecks to Restored Church of God? And you mentioned that they don't pay the exact mortgage, and that the church foots the rest of the bill. And of course they can't afford the full rent because they're giving all their money to the church. I mean, do you foresee them doing the same thing with this house? That, I mean, they're not going to be able to pay the full amount?
Well, if I look at the Zillow site correctly, and I've got so many documents to go through, but I believe the mortgage estimate was around $3,500 a month. Yeah, 35. Oh, that was with the 500,000. So let's say $3,000 a month for the mortgage on the property. There's no way that people can, I mean, they can. If you have 4 single men living in that house in each 1 bedroom, then maybe, but I really don't know who's going to live in there. I don't know if it's a big family, one of the ministers, they're going to move in there. I mean, I have no idea who's going to live there. But whatever it is, and all the properties are about the same, that the rent you charge, the rent that the Restored Church of God charges for the tenants who are living on their properties does not cover the entire cost of the mortgage and the tax every year that they pay in the property. So the Restored Church of God, even if they own a lot of property, even if the rent offsets the mortgage every month for every property, it's still a long, slow bleed of financial resources that in some way, shape, or form, tithes and offerings in common, which all go into the same, let's say in the same pot of money, is being used to be spent on those properties to keep them going and to maintain them and to fix them and to repair them. If the water heater goes out, if the basement is leaking, just like any other homeowner would have, those kind of expenses they have to deal with. It's just ironic that the timing of Dave Pack for the, since April this year, saying how imminent Christ's return is coming, and then he's gonna buy a property, buy a house.
Crazy.
House and buy the new one. So they basically sacrificed one house for another. That's the only logical explanation why you sell one house and buy another. So they basically sacrificed one house to pay for another, either to cover the loan. I theorized in my article what the logical possibilities would be, but the most logical reason is they couldn't, the fact is they couldn't afford both because they never would have sold the house unless they had to. So they're either sold one house to fix up the other house or to alleviate, put more down on the new house so that their mortgage isn't as high. I don't know. I'll have to wait for somebody else to leave headquarters and give me the full scoop.
How has RCG's reaction been to all this? I mean, what do you think they'll do?
Well, they haven't really done anything. They've been pretty silent. And I think for the most part, they try to just ignore and hope that it goes away. I haven't seen any kind of reactions within sermons either regarding the house. I noticed that they haven't mentioned it, which they would have to at a point if enough people, if enough brethren inside the Restored Church of God found out about this house, they'd write into headquarters or ask their local minister, wait, I just gave common, why are we buying a house? That would be a legitimate question for somebody to ask. But if they do, then they're like, oh, you're being divisive. Don't, that's God's money. You can't criticize what, God's church wants to do with God's money. And it's like, but you said Christ was returning. You said my salvation depends on common, and then you buy a house. That seems like not the reason I gave the money in the first place. And I also noticed that RCG, in as far as their reaction, they used to crow and announce, oh, we bought a new property. Oh, we bought a new property. Oh, we bought a new property. Back when the campus was new and fresh and growing, and it was quote unquote exciting for people in RCG to hear that the campus was growing, they would announce the houses. And then after a while, the announcements stopped. And I, as a member, as a staff person, and at headquarters, assumed we stopped buying houses. But then I would talk to somebody on the Sabbath. Oh, hey, what'd you do this week? Oh, we bought this new property and we had to clean it out. We had to tear the rugs out. I'm like, wait, what? We bought more house? We really? So they started keeping it a secret. And I guarantee you, they will never address this with the church unless they have to. They never, ever intended to tell everybody, hey, folks, we just bought this $500,000 property, and now look at this beautiful lawn right here on the campus. So now Mr. Pack can enjoy his evening stroll without being irritated and looking at that house and making comments with the people who follow him around. I don't have much to say about the topic, you could tell.
This will be a two-parter. The first part is in regards to the purchasing and selling of the properties. If you would like to hear the next topic in regards to the unopened house that the Restored Church of God had, please stay tuned for the next part. Thank you.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.